saving system settings and game progress on the memory card.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Saving Progress, where we hope to learn a little bit more about our personal history with video games. I am your host, Addy, and with me today, I have a guest that is very special to me. She is a freelance artist that does commissions on the side, but primarily does professional graphic design work for businesses and various other creators. She also does cosplay as a hobby and collects all kinds of anime and video game memorabilia, all of which she occasionally shows off on her Instagram and Twitter. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the one and only CybertechFoxArt to the show. How are you doing today, Lauren?
Hello, I am doing very well. How about you?
Right now, I'm doing pretty well. I'm just hanging in there, though. I've had a pretty, rough past few weeks. I've mentioned on my Twitter, @Jumpire Productions, but bouts of, sickness here and there, trying to get over that, but I feel pretty good right now, though. Ultimately, though, I'm glad you're here to join us. Anything new with you?
I had some pretty yummy food tonight for dinner. It was leftovers from Memorial Day. So
nice.
That's nice, yeah. Homemade cooking.
My dad and I whipped up some tacos for this memorable Taco Thursday. But that's really about as far as that goes.
Hey, tacos are awesome.
And you know what? I feel like this episode has been a very anticipated episode to record for us, especially considering the fact that you now finally have a chance to spread your awareness and activism for the gamer girl population. What say you about that?
I'll sell my bathwater.
The business continues to grow under CybertechFoxArt. Not that it really matters, but it's nice to keep things interesting on the show, and it's especially nice to have you on here due to the fact that you're into some pretty interesting and unique titles, if I do say so myself.
I do love my obscure video games.
Yeah, definitely. But before we get into those, I'd like to ask you something that I try to ask every guest on the show. Best if we just hear it in your own words so I don't continue to mess it up. Who is Lauren? What can you tell us? What do you do? Help us paint a picture as to who you are.
Well, I'm just a weird artist trying to survive in this crazy world. I guess I would consider myself a furry. I mean, I do have my own fursuit. I don't know. I just I exist.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, you mostly do. I mean, I touched on the commissions and everything, but you definitely do a lot of logo work. You do a lot of people asking for their OCs to be drawn. As far as I'm aware, that kind of stuff keeps you busy. Definitely.
It does, to the point where I'm a little bit too busy sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like we all get there at some point. And of course, on top of the art thing, you've also posted a few videos on YouTube as well. Is that correct?
A little bit. I mean, most of them are just speed paints that I export from Procreate. But I do have a couple cosplay ones, specifically an unboxing video for a cosplay prop that actually features the host of this show. So you should go check it out.
I'm a big stinky liar. I actually knew about the YouTube channel. But yeah, I do feature on an episode. Well, I guess it's not really an episode. It's just a video on your channel where we unbox this big Gurren Lagann Yoko Littner rifle. And I think it's actually pretty well done.
It is a massive chonker.
It is a really cool prop, and if you're interested in seeing Lauren and I interact in the same video, then I'll leave a link for that in the description, of course.
Yeah, I'll actually be debuting it at a convention in July.
There you go, yeah. But either way, if you want to get a sneak peek on that, I definitely recommend watching the video. It is a bit old, but it's a nice little nostalgic thing to watch. I rewatched it the other day, and I thought the editing held up pretty well. It's pretty funny.
Yes, you definitely helped with that.
And if you're paying attention to this channel, however, you might actually see Lauren make a few cameos in some future videos here. So this is likely not the last of which you'll see of her.
I'll be back.
Very, very exciting. Well, Lauren, I hope you've taken the time to think about a few games that have really come to inspire you over your lifetime. Ideally, these are games that you've chosen because they have left a lasting impression. They are the ones that have the privilege of being called your favorites. So to keep things simple, we've narrowed it down to 3 games, but no sense in not going the extra mile if the conversation deems it necessary. So, are you ready to get started?
I think so.
All right. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it then. The first game that I'd like to talk about is Legend of Legaia. For those of you that are familiar with JRPGs, you may have heard that before. I consider myself a fan of JRPGs, and I like to think I've played a good number of them. But going into this, I had virtually no prior knowledge to these games. Like, there's the first Legend of Legaia, and then there's the second one. I understand you have a lot more experience with the first one, so I won't bother you too much about the series as a whole, but it seems like that's the more common consensus anyways. Like, not too many people ended up touching the second one from what I've heard. However, like, despite all of that, the series has unfortunately eluded me, but it seems like I might not be the only one in that regard, as the first game retains its legacy as a cult classic, so to speak, to this day. So, what made you interested in this game? Do you remember how you discovered it, maybe? Like, did you buy it yourself, or, like, what happened there?
So both this game and the next game, I was shown it by an ex of mine, somebody I dated back in high school, and it's kind of, like, stuck with me through all this time. So, that says something about the game.
Yeah, it really stands the test of time.
Yeah.
And in more ways than one, it seems like. I mean, whenever I looked at footage of the game, it looks pretty good for being, I think it's a PlayStation 1 game, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, considering, like, the graphical limitations and everything of the time, I think the game holds up pretty well. The music's good, the graphics are good for that era, and the combat, I feel like, is the thing that tends to draw people in the most about it.
Yeah, the combat is a little different. It is turn-based, but when you go into a battle, you have typically 4 options. The usual is going to be like item and attack, like any other game, but then you have what's called Seru and then Spirit. So attacking will give you like a string of commands similar to that of a fighting game. You have high, low, left, and right. And by stringing those commands together, you get combos, which are called arts. Like, you can do regular attacks, but when you get certain combinations to do the arts, then they deal more damage.
So it seems like it's a bit of a combination of fighting games and that, like, sort of turn-based JRPG format. I mean, like,
yeah.
You really don't hear about highs and lows being introduced into anything aside from, I mean, when I played like Soul Calibur, that was a big component of that fighting style, but seeing that incorporated into a JRPG is definitely interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not like a huge fan of fighting games. Like, I'll play them, but yeah, I don't know, something about this just like stuck with me, and I enjoy it.
And I mean, I wouldn't really consider myself like a hardcore fighting game person either. Smash is about as far as I go with that, but that's not to say that that's the only reason why the game is super interesting. Of course, like, there's the whole story involved with it, which I don't really have much experience with, but at the same time, I didn't want to dive too deep into it, because if I do ever get around to playing this game myself, I want to be able to immerse myself as much as possible without, like, I like to go in blind usually to those kind of experiences. So what can you tell me about the story then?
So you play as a blue-haired character named Vaughn, and basically there are these creatures called the Seru, and they kind of just like are monsters that help humans, whether that's with like tasks or defense, stuff like that. But then one day a mist happens to appear, and it starts like turning the Seru into monsters, and they'll either like kill the people, or if they're attached to a human, then they possess them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like Pokemon, but a lot more hellish of an experience to live in. Like you don't get to push around a sheep or like a monkey or something. Like these are things that actively can betray you, that's insane.
So when like the story starts, kind of just around your village, and your village gets attacked, and you kind of are set out to like protect the village.
Yeah, of course.
And
proper JRPG fashion, understandable.
Yeah, the usual hero. But as you're doing so, you like discover this thing that starts talking to you and recognizes you by your name, and it's what's called a Rasaru, which are Saru, but they're not affected by the mist.
Huh. Okay.
So that voice then tells you basically what you need to do. Like, there are these trees that help ward off the mist, and you need to like find those trees, and that's basically the whole plot of the game. Like, you're just going off and like finding these trees and saving your universe.
Basically, like, you're trying to find out like the source of that mist and like preventing it from like the whole situation from getting worse. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that does sound interesting.
And it's funny because along the way you meet a red-haired girl, and you can name the characters. So of course in my playthrough I'm just like, Gurren Lagann, blue hair, red hair. So I'm like Kamina and Yoka.
And a red hair.
I think
girl.
the other one I named Viral. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean, the PlayStation 1 was definitely like, obviously there were like some really popular games of that era that were more popular in the West than like some others, but what people don't seem to realize if they don't follow JRPGs is that JRPGs were super prominent on the PlayStation 1. And, of course, like around that time that game came out, a couple other ones had dropped. The one that I'm using this episode as an excuse to nerd out on is The Legend of Dragoon. I never really got super into Final Fantasy until much later, so that was sort of like my first foray into like turn-based JRPG. Outside of like a couple other notable examples that I can't really pull them off the top of my head at the moment, but Legend of Dragoon was really something that was like not only is like the combat also relatively unique, like the same way how Legaia is, except in this game you take how do I describe this? You initiate the attack and then you have to time your button presses with, there's like a little reticle on the screen that comes up, and then like the target sort of circles in on it, and you have to time your button press with that reticle lining up with the circle in order to follow through with like the entire combo. So like one of the first moves you get in the game is a double slash. You got to hit the button at the right time, and I believe you might have to hit it again. It's been a while since I played it, but it's like if you manage to hit it at the right moment, then you initiate the full combo. But if you mess it up, then you don't hit nearly as hard, and that can definitely change the stakes of a battle pretty quickly, and especially later on whenever the stakes are a little bit higher.
Interesting. So Legend of Dragoon is one of the games that like I've heard of a lot, but I never actually got to play myself.
Yeah, it wasn't like I didn't get to play it like right away. Of course, every single console that I had for a long time was basically handed down to me by my brother, so I didn't really get to touch that until he got a PlayStation 2. I didn't really play like Ocarina of Time until he got the next best console, so that's the life of a sibling, of course. But
see, my sibling doesn't play video games, so.
Yeah. Oh well. But on top of other JRPGs, you got your Final Fantasies, you got your Chrono Cross, Xenogears. Like, there was definitely no shortage of JRPGs in that time period. And like, funny enough, I would blame the existence of these RPGs and JRPGs for kind of preventing me from getting into the more popular Western titles. Like, like people always talk about Spyro and Crash Bandicoot. Like, most of the time, if we were picking games, we wanted the ones that seemed the coolest, and being young boys at the time, where we look at like a dude with big hair and a sword, and we're like, oh my god, that looks so much cooler than whatever Crash Bandicoot is, so That's of course like whatever the mentality was at the time for us, but they were still of course fun games, and they didn't really stand the test of time in terms of like sequels and like all this other stuff. But you know, the fact that people can still sit down and have a conversation about them, I still feel like shows the integrity of that, like those specific game series, you know?
Right.
And I don't know if that's like something that you feel similarly about, or if it was like, if you ever even really had a chance to like go out and like pick out games with your family, like that was something that was like a big factor for how like we got a lot of our games. But like, what, you know, do you have any like memories like that?
So my family's not really into video games, so they never went with me. Most of my video games that like I learned about were from my friends at the time. And like, I mean, we played like Tony Hawk on the PlayStation, but most of it was Pokemon. I think at one point I had like a Rugrats game for the Game Boy Advance when I played it like with my DS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of, I don't want to say girlier games, but definitely not more of the action-packed one. Like, definitely Animal Crossing. And Nintendogs was also a big one for me.
No, of course. I mean, those were still fun games regardless, you know, of like who the demographic might have been. I feel like everyone has at least like one or two of those like licensed like weird video games like in their collection that they just happen to get. Like, you may not remember exactly how, but
yeah.
you know, it's just there. And you're still gonna remember it fondly, even though it at the time it was probably just intended to be a cash grab. But you know,
I think
whatever.
my most memorable experience getting a video game, my family and I went to Kmart, and I know that's a throwback.
You know, you say that, but like we had one in our neighborhood like for such a long time. but yeah, continue.
Yeah, we were at Kmart, and I don't remember what they needed, but I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to look at the video game section. And this was when like they actively sold GameCube games.
Okay.
And at the time I didn't have a GameCube, but I'm like, man, I wanted one. And I saw XD Gale of Darkness, the Pokemon game, and I was like, I have to have this. Like, even though I do not have this console, I want it.
Yeah, it looks like a cool game.
Yeah, I got it with my allowance money.
It looks like a cool game, like, even outside of, you know, knowing, like, Pokemon. Just, like, knowing that there was, like, a full-fledged Pokemon game that you could play on a home console was... something that like the franchise didn't really revitalize until just recently. Like, you know, they first like tried with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, but you know, eventually they moved on to the games that we know now, especially with the most recent reveal of Scarlet and Violet. You know, that's going to be the next big thing for however long.
Yeah, and I feel like they,
but, you know,
I feel like they made those games and then they just want to forget about them. Because it was only recently that they got Shadow Pokemon again. They added it to Pokemon Go.
Oh,
and like
okay.
that's been the only instance of it since the GameCube games.
Huh. That's interesting because like that's a cool concept, you know. You don't really hear about that being brought up like all too much, even though they got brought back, like you're saying.
I just think maybe the demographic like might be a little too young to really like understand that.
Possibly.
Because I mean, the people talking about like Gale of Darkness and Coliseum are people around our age.
Yeah. And it wasn't as maybe accessible by chance because, like, you know, the handheld market was really blowing up because people wanted to be able to play these games on the go, like on the bus or whatever. And, you know, you don't, like, it was starting to be like you don't really associate Pokemon with home consoles. You still kind of associated it with, like, that 2D turn-based combat. Like, you had games like Pokemon Stadium on N64, which is one that I owned and I had fun with personally. But then you also have, like, your Gale of Darkness and things like that, which... The GameCube, as far as I'm aware, did not really sell as well as as well as like the PlayStation and other consoles, you know. So so going full circle back into the game that we were talking about, what exactly made you like be so interested in it? Like, I understand like how you came to know it and, you know, how it was introduced to you, but like, is there just something about it that like, is it the nostalgia? Is it like the gameplay? Like what can you tell me about that?
I honestly think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, like, there is a nostalgia aspect to it, but I just had a really fun time playing it. Like, if you grind a lot, you can become God, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes
like,
sense.
I grinded all of the mini games, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word optional. There are some optional bosses, and one being bees. If you hit a certain tree, then bees come out and attack you.
Oh, wow.
But they're super strong, like ridiculously.
No.
So, you know, I experienced that, and obviously I lost badly.
Before you knew what you were getting into.
Yeah, and I grinded the mini games, like got these super like good armor, good items. And then I just went back and I kicked their butts.
Would you consider this like your first experience with JRPGs then, or?
It's definitely not my first, but I think it's definitely one of the most fun ones that I've had.
Okay. And
also, the music's just good. Like, you know, if I'm like trying to work on something, I'll have it playing in the background.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I do that with I mean, I like to tell myself that I can multitask listening to music and doing other things, but my brain has proven that I'm not as good at that as I thought I was. But, you know, sometimes like if I'm driving or things like that, like I'll put on a soundtrack or two here and there. You know, recently I talked about Hollow Knight, and in doing so I realized how good the music actually is on its own. So, you know, that's definitely not a foreign concept to me. And I haven't gotten a chance to really listen to a ton of Legaia's soundtrack, but I am definitely going to take your word for it, because if it's anything like Legend of Dragoons, then I can I can definitely vouch for it.
Yeah. Another thing that I like is just some of the one-liners in it. Like what I showed you through Snapchat.
Oh, like the humor.
Yeah, just like some of them you don't expect, and it just like catches you off guard.
Yeah, I always like when a game can kind of it's such a fine line to balance, really, in games that try to take themselves seriously, but they also need like some kind of comic relief. But I have but from the stuff that you send me from Legaia, it does I feel like it handles itself pretty well.
Yeah. Like it can be serious, like that scene that I talked about. Like, I don't want to give it away because it's like they're explaining a plot point,
yeah,
for like the context, but like they're just having a serious conversation, and then like Noah, she just blurts out like this like comedic relief line.
So of course you have a lot of memories associated with the game, and you know, you seem like you have a lot of experience with it. Is there a particular reason why it's one of your favorites? Like, because going into this episode, I definitely expected you to talk about certain games, like ones that you bring up more often, but whenever you mentioned Legend of Legaia, I was actually kind of surprised. So, you know, what makes you consider that like a favorite of yours? Like, has this game sort of changed your perspective on anything, like in that way, or like does that have anything to do with it?
I don't think it changed my perspective at all. I just really enjoyed playing it, and it's one of the games that like I need to replay just to experience it like when I'm a little bit older, because you know, when I first experienced it, I was in high school and, you know, dumb stupid teenager.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I want to replay it as an adult to see if I've picked up on anything that I didn't at first. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited to do that at some point. I don't know when, but like I don't get this feeling from a whole lot of games, and I think that's what stands out to me.
Do you have any idea like why particularly, or is it just like this like strong emotion?
I think it's just the strong emotion, because like obviously I enjoyed it back then, So I don't really know where I was going with that thought. So we're just gonna scrap that.
Fair enough. But considering like going back and replaying games from such a long time ago, I mean, there's definitely like experiences that you have like as a kid, like whenever there's things that like go over your head. But whenever I jump into an experience, like for example, like Kingdom Hearts, it was realistically a very different experience for me as an adult because, back then I didn't really care so much about like the difficulty and like the things that like bothered me while playing the game. Like this is the case for pretty much anyone, but like you get more impatient as time goes on. And I've noticed that whenever it comes to games that are maybe slower paced or like they have certain sections that you don't like so much, those are the things that tend to drag on the most. And when I'm talking about like, I bring up Kingdom Hearts because I have noticed that I really do not like the gummy ship segments, and I thought that I liked them.
I really don't know anybody who does.
You'd be surprised, especially with Kingdom Hearts 3, how they introduced like a whole new direction to it. Like there's people that are pretty fond of it, and if you want to get a platinum trophy, like you have to do those things. But for myself, it was like I remember having a lot more fun with it back then than I do now, like replaying those games. And thankfully, I don't have any plans to replay them anytime soon. Not to say that never say never, but I just wish there was an easier way for me to go back and play something like Legend of Dragoon, because the last time that it was actually made like available for like within a reasonable capacity was on PlayStation 3. You could go through the PSN store and actually just like buy it for like $5 or $10. Like it was really not expensive.
Cool.
Yeah, you could just straight up buy it, but it's only for PlayStation 3. You can't get it on PS4 or PS5 as far as I'm aware. Like it might be a part of the new PlayStation Plus packages that they're doing. Like I know that they're bringing over a bunch of old games, but I haven't had the idea to like look through that.
Well, didn't they shut down purchasing things on the PlayStation 3?
It wouldn't surprise me. I know they're shutting it down for the 3DS, and that's scaring me. But
yeah, I mean that's crazy to think, because like I don't consider that to be that old of a handheld console.
No, it's really not. But the thing is that companies they have to shift their priorities somewhere, so if that involves cutting off services and like making sure that they get more funds from it, because like they know that by telling people, hey, our store is shutting down in a year, they're going to scare people into buying these points cards and redeeming it for these games that they may not get a chance to play after the year passes. So
right,
at least PlayStation is making an effort to preserve those games, but Nintendo is just notorious for not preserving the games that are like the most relevant. Like
I feel like eventually they'll add those, but like it'll probably be locked behind a paywall of their like online service.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, you can play N64 games right now, but you can't play all of them. You can play some of the more notable ones, but it's taken way too long to get to that point. And I think the 3DS is next in line, because the Wii U shop is also shutting down, which allowed you to play a lot of different DS and 3DS games, even Game Boy Advance, which was not really a thing that was on the 3DS, even though considering like the previous versions of the DS, like they had an actual Game Boy Advance slot. So you would think that they would make more of an effort to have those games be accessible. But, it's Nintendo is a whole different subject in and of itself, but I'm just glad that Sony is making an effort to bring back some games, even though they have mentioned that the PlayStation 3 is notoriously hard to emulate, which I think is kind of interesting. Like if the creator of the console themselves has noted that it's hard to emulate, then it's like, well, shit, what do we do now? And I don't know. Maybe that is in line for like something to do, like who knows, like I mean, I know you own copies of Legend of Legaia, but maybe in the future they'll have it available for PlayStation Plus or something.
That would be really cool.
I couldn't tell you, because I think I have a copy of Dragoon somewhere, but It could be with my brother, even. Like, I might not even have it in my own house.
I feel like we did see a couple copies when we've gone to, like, but I vaguely remember that they were super expensive.
I do remember seeing that at, like, the, like, local game stores and things like that, but I don't remember them being, like, too expensive. Like, yeah, for what they are, they're a little overpriced. Like, it's still like $60 to get it, but Final Fantasy VII like is also around the same price for a physical copy. So, like, for the original version, that kind of like doesn't surprise me too much. But I'm hoping that I can find it first before I resort to actually going and buying a copy, because I don't even know where my like PlayStation 2 is to begin with, nor my PS3 even. And I've mentioned a couple times on previous episodes that I just have no idea where those consoles went. Like, the PlayStation 4 basically took over my entire library, and like these other consoles, they just disappeared. And,
honestly, though, that's just what happens as you get older.
Yeah.
Like, you get new things, and then the old things disappear. Like, you didn't get rid of them, but they're just gone.
No, I would have definitely known. Like, and I know for a fact that I wouldn't have sold my consoles at all, because the PlayStation 2 wasn't even mine, it was my brother's, and the PS3 was the first console that I ever bought with my own money. So that was a really big deal when I was like 16, I think.
I mean, I think my first console I bought myself was the 360. I bought it used off of somebody at high school.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, game with Halo.
The 360 was one of my more memorable consoles, even though I consider myself more of like a PlayStation and Nintendo guy. Like, I played a lot of 360 mostly because that was the console that my brother and I like shared at the same time. Like, he would play all of his like different shooters and like Call of Duty and like Battlefield, all these other different games. But that's where I got into like the various Tony Hawk games, like Tony Hawk's Project 8, along with like a couple other more notable ones like BioShock Infinite, Portal, even. Just a lot of games that, like, yes, you could play them on PlayStation, but like console wars were a huge thing at the time, and I was always like, oh, well, the 360 has better graphics than the PS3, so why would I ever want a PlayStation 3 when I can still play it here? Like, there were some notable exclusives, like, for example, God of War, which I still name as one of my favorite franchises of all time, that I just could not play unless I ended up going and getting my own PlayStation 3. And, lo and behold, I ended up getting the God of War Edition PS3 that came with every single game leading up to, I think, Ascension. So, goes to show how far I was willing to go just to play those games. But, I don't know.
I wanted to circle back because you mentioned about, like, slow progression video games.
Yeah,
and like, Legaia's story isn't slow, but when you're moving in like the map overworld area to like the different locations, it is so slow. Painfully slow, because there's not fast travel. So, if you're in your original village and you want to go all the way to the other side of the map, well, you literally have to walk your character all the way across the map.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And those are things that, like, they're like these necessary wrinkles that needed ironed out over time, because back then that was just what games were. You didn't really consider too many options of like fast travel and things like that, because that doesn't mean it makes it any easier to deal with.
Yeah, it was painful.
Yeah. I guess I should ask, do you want to take this opportunity to like jump onto the next game then? Because it sounds like you want to talk a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, I think we can segue into Grandia.
Well, you already said it about as best as I could, so let's just go ahead and jump into Grandia.
Yeah, I jumped the gun. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was the one that offered the option to you, so I have here that you are more familiar with Grandia 1 as well. So again, not going to make you get too deep into the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I played the second one and it's not bad, but I definitely think the first one is more notable and memorable.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people seem to agree, because like back then it was kind of like, if you had a good franchise going, and this is something that we'll probably touch on more in like the news portion of the podcast, but a lot of these companies, because they were producing games that were so similar to each other around the same time, it's like you either sort of like went with the flow of like what games were popular, or like if your franchise took off, then you just kind of like kept going with it. You know, it's really a slippery slope. But talking about Grandia, however, I know that my experience with it is, I mean, it pretty much just stems from you having me try it. I like the concept and the story seems interesting enough, but I haven't really been able to play it very much since. So what can you tell us about Grandia? Because I feel like that's a game that, like, it's still somewhat relevant, but again, if you're not following JRPGs, like, you're not going to know what it is. So like, what can you tell us about it?
It good game.
All right, great.
No,
well, that's the end of the episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you. But no. Yeah, what can you tell us?
It's just like a really like fun, adventurous JRPG. Like, you're literally just playing as a kid who like wants to basically discover the world and follow in his dad's footsteps. In doing so, he leaves home with his friend Sue, and they just travel. You meet some fun people. Meet Fina, who also joins your party eventually. And yeah, you just explore, because in their universe, the world technically ends at a wall called the end of the world. And he thinks that there's like land and life outside of that.
Okay.
Yeah, just a fun kid having fun.
Yeah, like that. That's kind of what I remembered more about the story. Like, it was like, oh, this kid literally, he just wants to go on adventure and like also find out the mystery of like his dad, I believe, you know, because his mom still lives like in the same. I think they still live in the same house, right? Like, he doesn't.
Yeah, and they own a restaurant.
That's right. Yeah, so I remember that part of it. I spent a lot of time in the first section of the game, so like that town that you sort of like familiarize yourself with. I think I like just started getting into like outside of the town before I ended up putting it down. But
yeah, you stopped right before you meet a very important character.
I see. Well, that would explain why I don't have that much experience with it. I do want to jump.
It is a slow start.
I do,
like, I will admit.
Yeah, it did take me a minute, but I do, like, I have nothing against it. I do want to jump back into it. But what can you do you remember how you discovered Grandia? I think you mentioned like something about like your friends like giving it to you or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same thing with Legaia, previous relationship.
Right.
That's actually how I discovered a lot of games. But yeah, it was kind of just like, here is game, have fun, play it, you know, let me know your thoughts.
Okay.
I did play both of them without any guides. So, you know, what I know of them was either what I discovered or like what I was told.
And I assume you ended up beating it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I beat that and the second one.
Oh, so you did beat the second one?
I did, yeah.
Okay. I thought you weren't like you played it and then maybe you put it down or something, but okay. I didn't know that.
Nope, I finished both.
So, I think it's fair to say that you like the first one more than...
Yeah, I mean, the second one is more about, like, saving the world kind of thing.
Okay.
Whereas, like, the first one, like I said, it's just kid going on adventure.
Yeah, much more, like, I don't want to say whimsical, but it's, like a simpler plot.
Yeah, and it just allows you, like... I mean, you do advance the plot, but... you know, you can just take your time and explore.
Yeah, and for me personally, you know, I did say a little bit about, like, oh, I don't really have anything against the game, but, like, I thought the combat was interesting, and as I said before, I think the story and the art style are pretty cool. It's just that, like, that like, isometric camera angle and, like, just, like, the managing the camera in general, it was just a little too much for me to get past easily. And
yeah, it's not very user friendly.
Yeah, and that's the only concept that I would say did not age very well, because there are games nowadays that handle an isometric view pretty well. Like take Hades, for example. It's a pretty popular indie roguelike right now. But at the time, I think it was just like, I don't know, it was just like so weird to me, especially because I hadn't played anything like that. Like, it's not like a fixed camera angle like how Final Fantasy or how Legend of Dragoon is. And I'm not too sure about like the movement in Legaia, but Grandia was really trying to do something big, and in turn it made it it made it a little bit more of a headache than it needed to be. At least in my opinion.
You can control the camera, but not really.
Yeah. But I know I'll probably jump into it, even though like despite all of that, like you'll probably get me back into it after I stop making you play all of my stupid games. So
you need to finish Life is Strange first.
That too. Yeah, that's a game series that I thought you were going to talk about, but I guess you wanted to take the opportunity to talk about a little bit more obscure titles. I get that.
Podcast 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, possibly. I don't see why not. I have a few other friends that might talk about it as well, so it definitely won't be the first time the name's mentioned on the on the podcast. But I wasn't sure whether or not to save this for the news portion of the show, but I think it's pretty cool that the games ended up getting a re-release on the Switch. I'm sure you were really happy to see that happen.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised because like nobody talks about Grandia, so for that to get a re-release, it's just like, okay, I mean, I'm happy, but like, yeah. I don't understand why.
I mean, it's like, I don't remember exactly who released the games. Like, is it Sony or is it Square Enix? Do you remember?
I think it's Sony. I do believe. It was originally Game Arts and then it was Sony. Because actually, when it first released, it released on the Sega Saturn. And then 2 years later, it got ported to the PS1.
Oh, okay. So the PS1 version was a port.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I have zero experience with Sega consoles, and I think that's to do with just, like, not too many people were buying Sega consoles to begin with.
Yeah, especially the Saturn. Like, I've heard it did not do that well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what led to Sega just becoming strictly a game company after that. Like, they're just like, you know what? We're just gonna put Sonic on Nintendo and call it a day. I know for a fact that Square Enix likes re-releasing their old games, especially if you follow them on social media. You'll see that, like, Secret of Mana or, like, a couple of other, like, really popular JRPGs. Like, I want to say they're popular, but they're popular only really to the JRPG crowd. Like, they're still very obscure to most people. And in a way, like, some people could say, like, they all kind of play the same if they don't really understand it. But, these games, they hold a special place in a lot of people's memories, And I think Square Enix realizes that,
Yeah, and considering that it got re-released on the Switch, I feel like that was more Square Enix's doing than, like Sony, because if it was Sony, then it would make sense to be on the PlayStation.
Yeah, it would just be through whatever subscription service, Yeah. And like Square Enix will they've put Final Fantasy games on mobile. Like you can go and pay like $10-$20 to play like Final Fantasy like 1 through like 6, I think, on there. And there's a lot of games that you can just like jump into, and they make it accessible, I think, is the most important part, because Sony technically makes them accessible, but you're still paying like a subscription service, and you may or may not get the games that you want from that service. So it's like you just gotta wait until the games that you do want come out, and it's just a whole nother, like, it's just a rabbit hole at that point. You like, your money just keeps going into this thing that you can't guarantee you're getting your money's worth out of until it actually comes around, so.
Yeah, I don't really invest in the subscription services. So.
No, you don't even have PlayStation Plus, which
no.
I don't blame you. I mean, it's not like you're playing online either, and I don't play online, but I do like getting the quote-unquote free games every month, so. And the save data backup is a big thing for me.
Back in the days of Xbox, like, I would, I'd get Xbox Live, like, pay for it and stuff. But I don't know. As I grew up, I'm just like, single player games.
I get that. Yeah.
But yeah, PlayStation Plus is good to have, like, for the cloud storage.
What was, like, there was some other RPG that you wanted to buy for PlayStation. I think it was like some like other like obscure thing that I knew nothing about. You went to and you almost had it shipped in, but you decided not to because you didn't have a PS3 at the time. Like do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, Kaya Dark Lineage for the PlayStation 2.
Yeah. What's that all about? Like, do you
you beat up werewolves.
And is it a JRPG or is it something else?
I'd say it's more, I guess, kind of platformer-ish in a way.
Interesting.
Like, I mean, the plot is, like, your brother, like, disappears. He gets, like, kidnapped or something, and you have to, like, go after him, and, like, it's just all these weird enemies that are werewolves, and you just beat them up.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I was reminded of that, but, it just goes to show that there's still like a demand for these kind of games, even if, you know, they may have fallen into obscurity. Like, people are still selling them and they're still able to be bought, you know, like if it wasn't for like these like shops around us, like you could still go like on eBay or something. Like, it's not impossible to find. It would just be really nice to not have to do any of that and just download it from some streaming service or whatever. I don't know.
Right? I mean, I'm sure I could emulate it, but
yeah. Yeah, and I'm like I could realistically emulate like a bunch of games, but I don't know, it's just such a headache sometimes, and I really don't try to go down that route, like, if I can help it, you know. But if the game is like, a physical copy is like $700, like, yeah, you bet your ass I'm gonna try and exploit that. But
yeah, I mean, the in-case copy of Legaia was over $100.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, I paid that just because that's a game that you never see being sold.
Yeah.
So I had to snatch it up.
I get it. Well, speaking of buying games, I want to go ahead and try and hear you sell this one to me. So, regarding Grandia, why should our listeners play this game? Why should I continue to play this game after my, let's call it, extended hiatus? Ultimately, you know, I just want to hear what you come up with, but you got to do it in 10 words or less. How does that sound?
Well, I'm going to joke around first. If you don't do it, you're going to get bullied by a furry.
Okay, fair enough.
So, how does that make you feel?
Fate worse than hell, if I do say so myself. But, you know, you can count with your fingers or your toes, but not both of them, because you only get to choose 10 words.
I don't think I can control my toes that way anyways.
You could still, you know, point at them, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to talk about your toes any longer, so 10 words or less, starting now. You can also write it down if you want to. I'm not going to tell you can't.
That's what I'm doing.
Perfect. Yeah, get your thoughts all out there. Lay them down. Reorganize them. Whatever you got to do.
Okay, I think I have it.
Perfect.
Play as funny little man with a flying puffball.
Play as funny little man with flying puffball. Okay. That's funny. I like that.
Yeah, and it's going to confuse people because they don't know what I'm talking about, so now they have to find out.
Exactly. You could argue that could also describe Super Mario Galaxy as well. It could say I don't know, I could go on, but overall, great summary. I agree.
10 out of 10.
So, just to kind of round the topic off, do you feel like Grandia has kind of changed your perspective on things? Like, has it at least, like, I don't know, made you think differently about video games? Or maybe this has just, like, made you think differently in, like, your, I don't know, like, your day-to-day, so to speak? Like, has it left, like, a significant enough impression to kind of, you know, facilitate that kind of thought?
I think so. I mean,
or maybe,
honestly,
maybe you learned something new from it, possibly.
I don't know if it really taught me anything aside from patience with the camera angle.
Right.
Because, like, I don't think JRPGs are, like... To me, they don't really have a message. They're kind of just, you know, you go and do your thing. So they don't really affect me in my day-to-day life. I'm very simple. If I like it, I like it.
Okay.
I would love to see Grandia merch, though. Honestly, like...
Just like t-shirts and
somebody
things
needs
like that.
to make it. Yeah. Or, like, plushies of, like, some of the enemies or something. I don't know. It would be cute.
Yeah, I can't say I've seen anything like that before, but, you know, if all else fails, you have...
I have the internet. I can commission somebody.
You have Redbubble, you have Etsy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But okay, you were about to say something before I jumped in and said something about, like, was that it, or...
You know, I don't remember what I was going to say, but I have something else to say.
Okay.
There's just this random memory that I have. It's, like, on disc 2 of the game, and which is, like, after, like, one of the big plot points.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in this area, and something glitched, or, like, something happened with the audio, and the music was getting looped over by, like, all these enemy sounds, because, like, the enemies, the monsters make, like, little cries, and that combined with the music, it was just hell.
Oh man.
But it made me laugh so much because, like, you don't, at least I never personally experienced glitches like that in order games. So it was just like monster cry after monster cry, but also other monster cries looping over that was the music. It was like sensory overload.
Well, speaking of sound effects and various things throughout the game, I do remember really enjoying the soundtrack, and I do remember a lot of that being one of the more memorable parts of the game for me. But not only that, the gameplay is also super unique. So, you know, what can you... I assume that's one of the bigger parts of the game for you that you enjoy.
Yeah, so, you know, you're just going through the world, and when you encounter an enemy, it's kind of like the battle stage.
Yeah,
that's what you want to call it.
I was going to call it like
reflects,
a stage or like an arena or something.
Yeah, it reflects the environment you're in. So, you know, you're in a 3D space, and the enemies and your characters, they, like, run around in this 3D space like they're not static. You can move them. There's certain moves that you may not be able to get to do if the enemy's too far away. So if you're walking, you might just stop, like, in the middle of the stage because you ran out of moves.
Oh, I see.
But, like, the attack part is, like, typically the same with, like, any JRPG. You know, you have your weapons, you have your spells, items, things like that. You know, HP, MP, all that fun stuff.
And can you control your character, like, when he's in that little arena, or is it more like...
No, it kind of just moves on their own. So, like, if you pick an enemy to attack, they'll move on their own and, like, goes towards them.
Yeah, because I couldn't remember if it was like it was an interesting concept, but it was like, I feel like they could have done a little bit more with it.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, it is turn-based, but it's kind of different. It's like,
there's like
also time-based.
Yeah, the
like
timing on it.
Yeah, you have a bar at the bottom, and, like, your characters are on there as well as the enemies, and, like, depending on what your speed is, you know, the enemies might attack twice in a row if you are, like, pretty slow, or it could be the other way around. You can attack multiple times in a row. It just really depends on, like, your speed and the enemies.
Yeah, so how fast your character gets to the end of that bar is, like, once you reach the end of the bar, that's when it's your turn to attack. So it's like, in some cases, like, when the fight first starts, your character will be ahead of the enemy at first, but, like, of course, you hit the end of the bar and you do your move, naturally it's going to be the enemy's turn right after that. So, like, depending on your speed and other factors, like, it's nice to be able to visualize just exactly what's going on, like, with the the move patterns and like what turn, like whose turn will actually be next, because sometimes you may not even know that it's like, okay, you know, generally speaking, it's my turn and then it's my party member's turn and then the enemy. But like sometimes the enemy might actually catch up to like go right after your character, and then your party character would go right after that, you know. And that adds like a bit more of an interesting dynamic, because you can actually see what's going on and you can kind of strategize and go into it a little bit differently than you would like in a standard general turn-based format.
Right. So like at the start of the bar, and then just a little bit ahead of it is like, I don't really know what you want to call it. It's like your command part, command time, where like that's where you can choose what you're doing. Are you going to defend? Are you going to use an item?
Okay. Yeah, so you get to the command part, and then once you select what you're going to do, then once you get to the end of the bar, is that when the like...
Yeah, then it does the action. But the cool thing is, if I'm remembering this correctly, if you are picking a command and the enemies are ahead of you, like they're going towards the attack phase,
yeah,
then if you like check them out, then you can see what move they're going to do. So you can like strategize that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you don't really see that in other games. Like most of the time, I mean, sometimes you can predict what they're going to do, but in order to see the actual move coming towards you, you know, usually that's not the case. I don't know. It is really interesting, and I like the concept. Again, I feel like it's like a little clunky like in practice, but I think maybe that also has to do with me just being like a pretty low level. Things were going pretty slowly, you know, so once the game picks up and you start to like really level up, I think like I'm sure that it gets to a point where, you know, it's a lot more fluid and maybe a lot more seamless that way.
Yeah, I mean, how many times can you really attack a snake until before it gets boring?
Tell me about it. I mean, it's not like Legend of Dragoon has no like annoying enemies. Like it's like, because in that game you'll be running around on like the main hub world, not the hub world, but like you're just like running around whatever area you're in, and you have this little arrow above your head that changes colors. So instead of it being like Final Fantasy where like you just randomly encounter something, technically it's still a random encounter, but you can kind of anticipate when you're going to run into an enemy. So first it's first the arrow is blue and you're just kind of running around getting to where you need to go, and then it'll turn yellow, and then eventually it'll turn red, and when it turns red, that's when you're like about to encounter an enemy. And like the more steps you take, the more likely you are to run into someone. And there's different like conditions and attributes and things like that that help that process go along faster or slower. So that's also a factor that comes into play. Like it's not just like you're walking and it's like, oh shit, like something came up and I have to fight now. But it's like you can visualize like when you're about to do an encounter, and I think that's also a nice way to sort of change up the pace of certain games, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I would feel if Grandia was random encounter. Yeah. I feel like that would kind of get annoying.
That is something that I liked about it, because it like you see the enemy and you have to go physically engage with them.
Yeah, and just like in Persona, like you get a little like perk for ambushing them. Like you are typically like a little bit faster, like more ahead of the enemies then.
That's right, yeah. I mean, you could take that option, like if we're talking like Persona 5, like you have the option to skip past enemies, and like if you wanted to elude them, then you could. However, you wouldn't get the experience you might need, like you may not level up as high as you wanted to, because you're skipping all these fights instead of engaging with them. Like once you encounter the boss at the end of the level, you might struggle with it more than you would have if you took your time and, you know, fought more enemies and jumped out and like jumped back into the metaverse, like things like that. So I feel like a similar concept kind of falls in line with Grandia, because, you know, you could theoretically skip over all those fights, but you'll be weaker in the end by the time you encounter something a lot bigger than that.
Speed run on level 1. Just all through the game.
No, thank you. I've had enough of trying to attempt the level 1 Kingdom Hearts 2 run, so I think I'm still Roxas in that game. Like in that level 1 run. But one thing that I wanted to touch on, though, because you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the fact that, like, you were like, oh, on the second disc, like, this is when something happens. I'm like, good God, I am so glad you don't have to swap out discs anymore for these games.
I think that was the only game I played that had 2 discs like that. Like, it definitely isn't common, or like wasn't common, I should say.
I see.
But they definitely did it in a way that, like, it wasn't bad.
Yeah, no,
because,
I mean,
you get
annoying.
to this point.
Well, yeah, it was a little annoying, but it was still like, ugh, okay.
Yeah, like, whenever I was playing it, I didn't realize that it was 2 discs. So I got to that point and I'm like, wait, is that it?
And it just stops right there.
Yeah.
Well, Legend of Dragoon had 4 discs, and I believe
oh my god,
I believe Final Fantasy VII also had 4 discs. There were games, I mean, I think Metal Gear Solid also had multiple discs, but I could be wrong.
I don't know, it's been a hot minute since I played them. I'd have to look.
Yeah, no, that's another series that I thought you were going to talk about as well. Lauren has played a lot of games, so when you look down at it, it's like when you look at your entire library, you kind of have to think to yourself, okay, what would I consider my favorites? And I think it's interesting that you chose to talk about these games, because, you know, I feel like no one else would have on the show, so, you know, maybe that drove your decision a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if, like, I do another episode, then I will probably touch upon Metal Gear. Because I want to brag about destroying the rays.
Oh, interesting.
Because, like, that fight is crazy. So, yeah, I want to toot my own horn, as they say.
Oh, of course.
But that's for a later time.
Yeah, I can't say I have too much experience with Snake outside of Smash Brothers, you know, but it's not that I have anything against the series. I just missed a whole lot of, like, PlayStation 1 games, but mostly because of the fact that I was playing JRPGs at the time. So that and Nintendo games, of course, you know, I remember Nintendo stuff more than anything, but, you know.
Did we want to touch upon the music at all?
If you want to, yeah.
Sure. So, just like with Legaia, I do really enjoy Grandia's music. Little fun fact is that one of the songs is actually in one of my TikToks. It is for the snow village that you go to, Snowtown Lane. And it's just like a cute wintry song. I don't know, makes me happy.
Yeah.
There's another one where you're on a beach and they have these little, like, laser noises that just makes me envision, like, you're just, like, have a ray gun or, like, a laser gun and you're just, like, shooting it like Wild West style.
You're on the beach and there's lasers. I like that visual. I think the beach would be a lot more interesting that way.
I did play that on, I forget what cruise it was. I think it might have been my first one, but I'm like, this is perfect.
Perfect cruise music.
But yeah, I think it's more JRPG than Legaia's soundtrack. Like, Legaia's is more foresty sounding. Like, foresty. I don't want to say fairy, but, like,
is it more ambient? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, there's not as many, Grandia, like, super prominent, like, melodies.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously the battle music is more upbeat.
Yeah.
But the other music is more ambient.
Right.
And then Grandia is just, like, full out JRPG music.
Yeah, it's definitely bombastic. Like, literally, like, as we're talking about the soundtrack, I'm picturing the music that plays in, like, the main, like, hub world, and it's like a mixture of like bagpipes with, like, this, like, jumpy drum beat that goes along to it, and I can't remember exactly. Like maybe there's like some marimba in there or something, but like it's really it's unlike anything I've heard before, and it really stuck out to me.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Well, why don't we go ahead and take this opportunity to shift gears from talking about JRPGs for like an hour and move on to the most recent title in this lineup, a single game entry. As far as I'm aware, it's a single game entry known as Night in the Woods. And you had me play this game, and I thought it was cute. I thought it was quirky in all the right places, and the atmosphere offers this like... It's like a really relatable feeling, and I feel like anyone in their 20s can at least relate to it in some aspect, especially with like certain elements of the game's plot. But yeah, you know, enough about me. What can you tell me about the game?
So you play as a cat, but not like feral cat, you know, like
they're all like anthropomorphic cats.
Yeah. And you're coming back home to your hometown. At first, you don't really know why. Your character just doesn't really want to talk about it. But it's like reconnecting with your friends, and just some weird things happen in the town. And you're like, huh, something's not right.
Yeah. I guess I should have mentioned that it's like it's darker than what I let it on to be. Like I'm like, oh yeah, it's a fun and happy game, but like no, it definitely gets serious at some points, and I think
yeah, it's more, I don't want to say adult themes because it's not like, you know, an adult rated game or anything, but
it's definitely not for like a, I don't know. I feel like a teenager could play it and still have fun with it, but like,
yeah,
I feel like you need to be an adult to really understand like a lot of like the themes that it's trying to explain.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is going to be spoilers, but it does deal a lot with like mental illness and sexuality, and kidnapping is one of them.
Yeah, like mental health and even just some like mystery involved, and like even paranormal things, like you're talking like ghosts and like astral projection and like all this other like crazy shit that like you wouldn't know just really looking at it. I mean, the game itself does have this like, it's a very unique art style, I should say that. It's unlike any other game that I'd really seen in terms of just like it's a platformer, but it also tells a really compelling story. And the characters, they all like, you would never confuse one of the characters with another. Everything is very unique in that aspect.
Yeah, no matter who you talk to, everybody has a backstory.
Yes.
It's just some characters, like, you get more into it than others.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's almost like real life, you know, you get to know some people a little bit better than others, and, you know, that's not to say that those people don't have stories to tell. It's just, you know, however you decide to play the game, that's what you learn more about.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can talk to people in passing and like only get a smidgen of like their actual life story.
Yeah.
But then like you talk to your friends who like you spend a lot of time with, and then like you really understand them.
Yeah. And is it fair to say that like that game does hinge a lot on like, you know, what decisions you make in the game?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, the outcome is always going to be the same.
Yeah,
but
because like it does have a story to tell, but there's different, like there's a lot of different things that you can do in the game.
Yeah, the information that you learn can change depending on your decisions and like depending on like just who you spend more time with. That's why I usually, like, if I recommend this game to people, I recommend doing multiple playthroughs, because, you know, you might try to spend time with all of your friends, but you're not going to get as much of their backstories as you would if you would focus on just one.
No, yeah. Like there's a big, I think even before I started playing it, like you introduced this concept to me, like you're like, so it's going to ask you like who you want to hang out with, and obviously like you can only hang out with one person at a time, so you're not going to experience everything on the first playthrough. And that's something that I still should go back into and like explore, you know, like I've only played through it the one time. I won't get too into detail like what exactly I experienced, but I think, well, actually I might as well. Yeah, I hung out the most with I think her name is B, and
yeah, Beatrice.
Yeah, and you played a lot with
Greg.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Greg rules, okay.
Yeah, they're all really unique characters, though.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I liked about it. And that's not to say that like if you choose one person over another, you won't learn anything about the other characters. But there is like a lot that you miss out on, like depending on like what paths you choose to take. So it does make a lot more sense for you to play multiple playthroughs if you can. And the game itself is not super long. I think it's only maybe like 8 hours, give or take.
Yeah, it's not a very long game.
No, so that definitely helps with the replayability and getting more out of it in each experience.
Yeah, like, I mean, I know a lot, but there's definitely secrets and options that I haven't gotten to yet.
You're telling me you didn't platinum this game? You didn't get the Steam Super Duper trophy for it?
I actually should try. It would probably be the only game that I will ever platinum, but
Yeah.
I should try to.
It shouldn't be too hard. Like, you know, you just follow a guide and you go through it, especially if you already know the story and like how everything kind of resolves. It's like, you know, at that point you're kind of just checking things off a list, but you're also experiencing like different things that like you wouldn't have experienced otherwise. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a good time to replay it, and I want to replay it around Halloween.
Yeah.
Because like it's just a good Halloween game, but it just didn't work out last year.
Yeah. It's definitely spooky in all the right spots, and the whole game I'm pretty sure takes place during like autumn. Because that's like...
Yeah, I think specifically October, because
Okay.
you do experience, like, their version of Halloween.
Yeah, because they have, like, Harvest,
yeah.
Yeah, going on for pretty much the entire duration of the game, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it's not the entire, it's, like, one night,
Oh, really?
I think. But, like, yeah, but it's like, all taking place in fall.
Okay. Yeah, and the game's like colors and the scenery and everything, they definitely reflect that. Like it's a lot of warm colors, but like I don't know, it's funny because it's like even though the game deals with like some like heavy topics, it is still like pretty cozy.
It is, and it's really funny too. They just like joke around so much.
Yeah, the humor is a huge part of it, especially because like in one moment you'll go from like we talked about like how the game is kind of dark in some aspects. A lot of that has to do with the character's personalities. So like May, the main character that you play as, can go like from like talking to her mom who like works at a church or something. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, she does work at the church. I don't remember exactly what she does though.
Yeah, so it's like you'll go from like talking to her about like things at the church or whatever to like being around your friends and talking about like burning your room like to a crisp with just like fire and like really like absurd things like out of context. It really facilitates this like the game's like morbid like dark sense of humor. And I think it's funny for people that enjoy that sort of thing. Like even if you don't, it'll catch you off guard, but then it'll make you realize just how exactly these characters operate and like what their like thought process is, you know?
Yeah, you definitely get a feel for like through their actions and like even their jokes, you can tell how they feel about living in a small town like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I know that like the big meme with the game is that like you're kind of a hooligan. Like you go and do crimes with your friends, and like the activities that you do are referred to just like generally as crimes. I'm not really like a troublemaker myself. I'm very much an as you would call it, obeyer of the law. But when the game forces you to do like these hooligan activities, at first I was pretty reluctant to it, but like I got to do it anyways because like I want to see how the game, like how the story goes. Like, come on, you know, if it wants me to like smash a car with a bat, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, I mean, like yes, they're crimes, but like they're also just really stupid.
Yeah.
So it's just like, okay, yeah, you're definitely breaking a law, but you're having fun doing it.
Yeah, it's like you can get into a knife fight with your friend just because you can, you know, like it's not smart.
Yeah.
It's not very thought out or educated, but I mean, you're gonna do it because you're just
because crimes.
Because crimes. That's just your personality at that point. I could go on about like what I think of the game, but I don't think we touched on like what got you interested in this game. Like, do you remember how you discovered it?
I think I might have seen it like on the internet, and like I just thought I'd give it a try because back then like it was only for PS4, and then eventually it did come out on Switch.
Okay.
I wish it had a physical copy because that would be cool to have.
Oh, I'm sure there was at some point.
I don't think so. But anyways, yeah, I think I just like got into it myself. And I was playing it in college and just like had a blast doing it. I remember I stopped. It was like right before the end. I was like, like I have class the next day. Like I have to stop. And then when I picked it up like the next day, it was only like 5 minutes left of gameplay. And I'm like, oh.
You had no idea that like you were right at the tipping point.
Yeah. Like I love the characters, I love the art style, just everything about that game. I just love.
I looked it up. Back in 2019 there was a physical edition released.
Oh, there was? Oh.
Yeah, but of course it was through limited run games.
Oh.
Yeah.
Man.
So maybe someday you'll get lucky, but
I don't know, maybe I have to go to their store.
Well,
like I think they have a store in like California or somewhere.
I don't know. I don't want to lie and say I do. So, but that was back in 2019 is when they released the physical copy, which is I think around the same time that. Well, I think it was around the same time that I also played the game. Like I played it like a long time ago.
I feel like that might have been last year or 2020.
True. Yeah, it might have been 2020. I don't know. When did you discover it then? Was that...
So I was probably, I'm going to say a sophomore in college.
Okay.
Because that's when I got the PS4. So that along with Life is Strange and The Last of Us, which I didn't play until I met you.
Yeah. I made you play the shit out of that.
Yeah, I just bought like a crap ton of games whenever I got the PS4. That would have been 2016.
Well, the game came out in 2017, so...
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so... Then I guess it was 2017 when I played it. Maybe early 2017? When did it come out?
It says...
That year?
It says February... Well, the game... Back in 2014 was when Lost Constellation came out. That was like the second supplemental game.
Yeah, that's about the stars and all that.
Yeah, and then the game itself was released for Windows, Mac OS, and PlayStation 4 on February 21st, 2017. And then the Xbox One version came out in December, and the Nintendo Switch edition came out in February of 2018.
Man, time's a weird thing.
and then it even came out on iOS as well. But that wasn't until 2021.
Huh.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. I mean, if I had an iPhone, I would.
Yeah, I already got it on 2 consoles, so... Wow, yeah, my time is really messed up.
That's okay. I mean, there were a lot of parts of the game that I thought were pretty cool. The fact that May is a musician along with the rest of the gang, I thought that was relatable. Being a musician, I thought it was cool, like that they would get together and just kind of jam, and you can actually control how they play. I think maybe you just control May, but like how they play on the bass, I think it was. I don't remember too specifically, but I did like the fact that
it's almost like a Guitar Hero kind of thing.
Yeah, it was really cool, and I was right at home in that. I love rhythm games, so. But other than that, the like the hidden secrets there are throughout the game, and just like all the other different like things that you can do but aren't necessary to complete the game, like they're sprinkled throughout like pretty nicely, like they're good details for what could have otherwise been just a very linear game. Like it has a story to tell. It wants you to get from point A to point B. I don't know. Like nothing felt like it was kind of tacked on, I guess I should say. You were rewarded for your exploration, and whether it's just dialogue or like you discover a new item or a new secret or something, like, ultimately it felt like a worthwhile experience.
Yeah, it didn't feel like, you complete it and it's like, oh, like that's it. Like they were definitely rewarding when you found them.
And again, I'm not really a troublemaker IRL, so whenever it made me do the things that like are relevant to the plot, I was like, oh god, but
and then there's me, just complete gremlin.
Yeah, you went full goblin mode on those options, and it's crazy because like I think that's what left an impression on me. It's like it made me go outside of my comfort zone when it came to doing things in games, because I'm so used to games just like kind of, I don't want to say holding your hand, but like there's not a lot of games that make you question like if you're doing the right thing, and Night in the Woods makes it pretty clear that it's like, no, you're not, but it's still fun anyways. Like you still want to see like what kind of trouble they get up to.
Well, they also kind of do that in the dialogue too, because like you are experiencing these things and it's not always like, you don't always have good dialogue options. So like
right.
Just like, oh, these aren't good to say, but I have to pick one.
Yeah. And also like on the topic of secrets, this is something that I wanted to touch on, is the whole thing with like getting on your computer and playing Demon Tower. I like from time to time I still think about like, I'm like, man, I should really beat Demon Tower, because I like
Oh no, you did.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
I'm 99% certain I did not beat Demon Tower.
No, I do believe you did, because you like would get annoyed with it and quit, but then you would come back to it and you're like, I have to complete this.
Okay. I don't know. I'll have to check the trophy list later, but I'm pretty sure that I did not beat it. Either way, the game is hard. It's like, I mean, for some people who are like better at like roguelites and like those kind of games, I'm sure you would have less trouble with it, but it was definitely challenging for me, and it was one of the more memorable parts of it, because it was like, it's just this stupid little completely optional thing. Like a more recent example is when I'm playing Celeste, there's like a little like 8-bit version of Celeste that you can play within Celeste, and it was like I had no reason to beat it, but I had to because I had stumbled upon it, and I'm like, boy, if I let this be, I'm not going to let it go. Like I gotta beat this thing.
Sometimes your brain's just like, I have to. Like, I cannot not do it.
Exactly. And with games, I feel that way a lot, especially whenever I am treating it in like a completionist aspect. Like there was no way that I was going to go back in and like do everything that the game has to offer, but that was one thing that I was like, okay, I have to do it. And if I have done it, then great, but if I haven't, you can probably count on me jumping back in and doing it at some point.
Yeah, I could be wrong. Like my memory has failed me before, but
I think now is as good of a time as any to test that memory, Lauren. So, it seems like you know your stuff about Night in the Woods, though. I would even go as far as to say you have the answer to every question out there.
Oh, I don't know about everybody. Thanks for making me feel good.
Well, the good thing for you is that I'm only going to ask you one in this episode's very own bit of trivia. So basically, you'll have some multiple choice options, so it shouldn't be too hard, but hopefully this helps test how much you really got to know about this game. But one more question before I ask you that one. Are you ready?
What happens if I say no?
Then we'll just skip on ahead and do something else.
That's it. End the episode.
No, I think you'll be fine. What do you say? You want to get into it?
Let's do this.
All right. So, the question is as follows. Night in the Woods has a lot of moments in the game that are very grounded in reality. These moments can vary wildly, from getting drunk at parties to bickering with your parents to going out to eat at local restaurants. And whether you find them personally relatable or not, sometimes you can't help but feel like you're watching the characters actually living through them. One of the optional things you can do in the game involves finding a small colony of rats hiding inside one of the buildings. And feeling bad for them, May swears to help them out somehow, and in order to do this, what does the player have to steal in order to help the mice? Is it...
Oh, sorry. I jumped the gun, I'm sorry.
Is it A, a hot dog, B, some cheese, or C, a pretzel?
I'm going to go C.
You think it's C, a pretzel?
Yeah.
Well, the correct answer is C. Congrats.
Yay!
C is for congrats. You have to steal a pretzel to feed the rats. And by going into the subway underneath the town, you come across the Trolley Side News building where they have pretzels on display that the player, as May, goes on to steal and bring back to the rats. And doing this once unlocks a single achievement, but doing it 3 times unlocks a second achievement, after which the rats disappear and reportedly cause a rat problem in the rest of the town.
Yeah,
Fun
because
fact.
doesn't the trolley owner, like when you first talk to him, mention that she's stolen before?
Yeah, they call you a thief because I guess you have stolen from them before. But I think it's funny that like I did feed them once, but I did not know that you could feed them multiple times.
I remember feeding them. Like at first I think, isn't it one rat?
I don't.
And then doesn't it have like babies or something?
I don't remember. Possibly.
I could be wrong. I don't know. See, I need to replay it.
And to be fair, there were a lot of options for trivia questions. I just didn't want to make it too hard since like so much of the game relies on different paths and routes you might take.
And I'm baby.
And because you're baby. But no, for real. I might as well tell you what else I had in mind.
Go for it.
One had to do with how many constellations there are in the game, which is a big factor, like a big part of the game, I should say. I was just straight up going to ask you how many constellations are there in the game.
So that's actually something that I didn't do in my playthrough that you did.
Oh, wow.
Was like talk to the teacher. Yeah.
Huh, interesting. So you wouldn't have had any idea then.
Yeah.
Well, if it was between 9, 13, and 22, which one would you guess?
I'm going to say 22.
Well, you're kind of right.
Oh.
It's 9 overall in the actual game. 13 within the Lost Constellations. I keep wanting to call it DLC, but it's the prequel. And then in total, with across the entire universe, like Night in the Woods universe, there is 22 to be found.
Oh, okay. Well, I learned something new.
And those numbers could be incredibly wrong because I'm just now realizing that 9 and 13 does not equal 22. But I don't know. Maybe there's some repeats in there. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to hang up too much on that because we actually have some gaming news to talk about.
Oh, I actually do want to touch upon something else real quick.
Okay.
Witch Dagger. So
yeah, what's that all about?
It's actually like, I do believe it's like a metal or rock band inside the game, and the cat like dresses up as this like, I guess, magician, and May dresses up as them for Halloween or Harvest. So yeah,
didn't
fun.
You cosplay it at one point?
I did. I think that was Halloween of 2019 because it was before the pandemic hit.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Before every costume had to incorporate a mask in some way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I could get a cat mask. But okay, now we can move on to gaming news.
All right, well, you said it first. Let's go ahead and just jump right into it. So the thing about gaming news, at least a part of this podcast, is we try to dive into, what the games have in terms of like a sequel coming up, or, if the developers are up to anything new and they have something to release. The unfortunate case with pretty much all of these games is that there's not really that much in the way of things that are coming along for it. And considering that 2 of the games are relatively old in comparison, and Night in the Woods, there were a lot of things that happened within the development team that sort of kind of led them to falling apart, so to speak. That's not to say that they disappeared entirely, though, as we'll touch on in a little bit. And what I have here is I think we could use this as a bit of an opportunity to talk about, where these companies went wrong, and like how the franchises sort of faded into obscurity, instead of talking about like what could be or what couldn't be. To kick things off, let's start at the beginning and talk about Legend of Legaia. Well, I might as well ask, do you know anything about Legaia's history and like kind of what happened with that, or because I got a majority of it written down here, but if you have something to say, you could say it.
Yeah, there was a lot of factors into essentially the fall of Legaia, and one of those was the writer getting fired, and other companies and writers taking over and not really understanding the core essence of what the game is. So
and like what made it good, basically.
Yeah, so that kind of like showed through to the second game, and they didn't really do any marketing for the second game, so it kind of just flopped. They just didn't pick it back up.
Yeah, so to, I guess, go in a bit deeper than that, the original developers for the game, they were a subsidiary to Sony, actually. They were called Contrail, and after they produced their first game, Legend of Legaia, they went on to produce several more games until eventually being merged back into Sony back in August of 2000 as part of a, just like you mentioned, like the one of the main guys getting fired. Like, they had a bit of a falling out with Sony executives. I mean, long story short, but for context, what I have here is that the first game sold really well and had overall pretty positive feedback. Around the same time, a lot of other popular games were released under Sony, such as, the aforementioned Legend of Dragoon, Chrono Cross, Final Fantasy IX even. So Legaia pretty much got pushed to the side. But like around that time, Hidenori Shibao, he was starting to have issues with Sony and even Contrail themselves, because they wanted to make all these changes to the franchise that he didn't agree with. Things like adding more tropey elements and things that made the game overall a lot less unique. Like, just to kind of like, oh, we need a Moe character, we need a this character, we need blah, 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 because these popular games have done that, They were really sort of missing the mark on what made Legaia so special. But basically, Shibao took Sony and threw them under the bus in an interview. Like, he made it very clear that he did not agree with these decisions, and in response, he got fired for it. So after all that happened, Legaia 2 came around, and Shibao wasn't involved at all. And Legaia 2 did so poorly and had just like no marketing or advertising behind it that Sony just scrapped the series and dissolved Contrail, who was, again, only a subsidiary at the time. And I got most of this info from you, but you got your info from this video by Eric Landon RPG that I'll be sure to leave a link to in the description below.
Yes, he definitely goes into more detail. And has like the actual screenshots and everything from the interview that he had. But I would definitely suggest taking a look at that video, because it does it does it a little bit more justice than I feel like we could. I mean, I only just learned of this relatively recently, so aside from that, I honestly have not been able to find a ton in the ways of what like the former developers are up to. It really does seem like the company just kind of split apart completely, and everyone went on to do their own things. Unfortunately, Shibao himself passed away back in 2018, so considering all of these factors, it's possible that Legaia may continue to just remain dormant for the time being. And it's not to say that things can't happen, but the more time that passes, the more you see that like the people's attention is being shifted. Like, people aren't exactly talking about these games anymore, and whether there's money in redoing them or re-releasing them or whatever. Like, same thing honestly really happened to Legend of Dragoon. Like, there were just more franchises that had more potential being released at the time, and it fell to the wayside, unfortunately. Like, it still has its following, and there's people that are still into it, but it is cool. I just recently learned that somebody is or a team is trying to do like a fan remake of Legaia, but there hasn't been any recent updates for like the past couple years, so I'm not sure if that project is still in motion or if it's just defunct now.
Yeah, I think you sent something about it to me. The last update that they had was sometime last year, so like there's not to say that like nothing's happening, but with no updates, it's kind of hard to tell.
Right.
It would be cool to see like a remake, but especially when it's like one person or just a handful of people involved in the process, it just makes it that much harder to put out a game and still be enthusiastic about it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's a lot of time and resources.
Absolutely. And while we've got that ball rolling, we might as well just jump into Grandia now. We talked about it a little bit in the past, but there was that Grandia 1 and 2 remake on the Switch, which is about as much attention as the series has seen in quite a long time. I mean, I could be wrong, but, do you know anything else about that, Lauren?
Not a whole lot. I mean, like I said before, it was really a surprise for me. Like, I figured, these are older games. Like, nothing's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
And then they're like, here you go.
It was so surprising that your money just jumped out of your wallet at that moment.
It sure did.
It just flung itself at the screen.
Very few things I have pre-ordered or bought as fast as I did.
Yeah. I mean, I know that like there was also a physical edition. Like we touched on Night in the Woods having a limited run games physical, but Grandia apparently also had that, I would assume, in like relation to the remake that was made for like Nintendo Switch. But
yeah, the remake, should say, I guess remaster, I don't know. Like, I don't know if those are interchangeable, but
I don't care.
The remake got announced first, and then like not too long after was the physical copy from Limited Run, but I already bought the digital copy. I'm like, it's fine, I don't need a physical copy. And now my brain's like, oh, why'd you do that?
You're like kicking yourself over it.
Yeah,
I understand. I mean, the thing that I feel about like digital releases is that like they're digital, they're not going anywhere, at least for like new gen consoles like Switch and PS4, which is funny to say because PS4 isn't even new gen anymore. It's all about PS5 and the new Xbox. But considering the fact that they're still so hard to get and the world just making it more and more difficult, it still feels like that's the current generation, even though it's technically considered outdated now. But yeah, I don't know, like I can always buy a digital copy later, but physical copies are like, especially if it's limited, I try to jump on them. And I like having physical copies because I like seeing my collection fleshed out before me. Like I see like all of my games like on my shelf, and I find that a lot more rewarding than like, I don't know, like scrolling through a screen.
Yeah. I mean, like during that time, like I didn't really have like the money to like buy the digital copy and then also spend the money on the physical. So,
yeah.
Because I already had the digital copy, I just
I
wasn't able to.
Yeah.
So
you couldn't post about it on your Instagram then. You couldn't have a physical copy.
I know.
Oh man. Well, as far as I'm aware, unfortunately the developers as well, like the original team behind Grandia, they also aren't really around anymore. I figured I might as well have you explain that, just because
yeah, I mean,
you probably,
I'm gonna give like a too long didn't read version.
That's fine.
Basically, Game Arts went defunct after the first one, and then the second one was made by a different company. I do believe it was
Square Enix.
Yeah, the second game was Enix, and then the third game, which is actually a spin-off, was Square Enix.
Oh, okay.
So even though like they are actually the same company, it kind of threw people off because it's two different names.
Yeah.
And they didn't really market it as a spin-off, so people went into it thinking that it was a part of the main series, and it wasn't. Like the second one did okay, but then the third one just went downhill.
Yeah.
Especially in the West.
Because it wasn't communicated well enough that it was not Grandia 3, but rather like just a spin-off of sorts.
Right. And the gentleman that you mentioned earlier also has a video on that, which I'm sure we will link in the description.
Oh, the Eric Landon.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I might as well. Just to give a little more context than we could. the unfortunate thing is with most companies like these that they produce a really good game and then they just disappear. So,
yeah,
is what
unfortunately.
it is. But with Night in the Woods, however, it's not as much of that case. Like, it is an indie team, so they weren't really like under Sony or Square Enix or any of these other huge companies that don't give a shit. Since they launched Night in the Woods in 2017, the devs who worked on the game, some of them went on to found TheGlorySociety, who teased their first project with a very similar visual style back in June of 2020. And I don't know if there is a name for it necessarily, but they did tease something, so I don't know. Like, there's no sense in not keeping our eyes open for any upcoming announcements, because chances are, the longer something goes on without being announced, like, there's bound to be something, like some kind of news around the corner. At least that's the optimistic way of thinking of it. But do you know anything about that?
I did see the teaser, but I don't think that anything has been released, like, anymore about it.
Do you know if it's it's probably not a sequel, especially considering the history with the company, but
I would be surprised if it is, but they didn't say anything about it, so it could still be a sequel.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it looks stylistically similar, but I don't know, maybe there is more about it that I'm just not aware of. But in my findings, I wasn't able to uncover a ton about it. But there's a lot of instances where people can like join Discords and like they actually get to talk to the devs and things like that. So that was an option for like that Legend of Legaia remake. Like, if I really wanted to know more about it, then I could join the Discord. But I didn't want to, so we're just going to leave it at that. But I do know, however, that back in September of 2020, the game was put out on Game Pass, making it easier than ever to play the game. That's the Xbox Game Pass, sorry. And then I touched a little bit on the iOS port that was released, and yeah, that's really about it in terms of news for Night in the Woods.
I'm trying to see real quick, because they used to have some merch on Fangamer. I'm trying to see if it's still on there.
Yeah, it was either Fangamer or like some other similar website.
No, I mean, it's a category, but yeah, they don't have anything on there because they used to have like figures and all kinds of stuff.
Interesting.
And I was going to talk about it, but nope, not anymore.
Well, you missed out. What can I say?
Yeah, I know. I was going to get the figures, and I decided against it, and, this is what happens when I wait on stuff.
And now you suck.
Yep.
Maybe they're on eBay. I don't know. I'm sure someone is trying to get rid of them. Well, that's about everything that we have for this month's episode. I would say is your chance to plug any last-minute promos for yourself, Lauren. So any social medias or YouTube channels or, just whatever you want to plug in, go ahead.
Well, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at CybertechFoxArt. Twitter and Instagram are definitely where I'm most active. My DMs are open, so if you wanted to commission me, then you are more than welcome to send me a message.
And you can get physical stuff as well, like you're not just doing like digital.
Yes, so I do occasionally do traditional commissions, either with color pencil or markers, and you get an extra perk if you get a physical commission from me. Then when I send it to you, you get a really cool business card.
Well, there you have it.
Buy my stuff, please. I'm a starving artist.
Well, on that note, I think that's everything then. Thank you so much for joining me on here, Lauren. It was a lot of fun. I had a good time getting to nerd out about games that I never really heard of before getting into this podcast. And I got a chance to talk about one of my personal favorites that I don't really get to. So, thank you for being on here. I hope you had a good time.
I did. I appreciate you having me on here. I love talking about games I like.
Yay.
Especially ones that not a whole lot of people know about.
Exactly. So, well, I had a good time, and I hope you had a good time, the viewer. So if you have any questions you'd like us to answer or have some recommendations for the next episode, feel free to leave a comment down below or message me on Instagram or Twitter at Jump Higher Productions. That's Jump Higher PROD. We'll be back next time when we find someone that we can dive deep into the discussion with, and hopefully we can continue to share our personal connections to video games with you all. Thank you so much for listening. Again, thank you, Lauren, for joining us, and bye for now.
Goodbye, you beautiful people.
Bye-bye.
You better go fight some more.